Welcome to Generations. My name is Beverly Crosby and I will be your host today. You are in for such a treat. We have with us Steve Rilan, who is the owner of Terra Garden Center. And Steve's going to talk to us about plant life, what to choose, what to look for, how to take care of them. But the special treat is that we're going to do a second episode on site at the Garden Center where we get our hands dirty. So let's get started with our episode 1. Let's meet our co-host and our guest. Elaine, so good to see you today. We've got such a fun show.
Yes, and I love the flowers. It's great to be here.
And Bob, so glad you're here, even though we know it's your last day.
I know. That's hard to even think about, but it's fun to be here this today. So, yep.
Yeah. And he brought a wonderful chocolate cake too. So hey,
It's great.
we were not going to turn him away, right?
No.
Well, with that, I'd like to introduce our guest, Steve Rilan. Steve is the owner and operator of Terra Garden Center in Lakeville. And Steve, you not only brought some beautiful plants for us to see, but we're really interested in your story. And how did you get started? Can you tell us about that?
Well, not in great detail, but I was born and raised in Arizona. I lived in Arizona for the first 40 years. I came to Minnesota and built a greenhouse with my uncle and learned a great deal about the plant business, and the opportunity at Terra presented itself. It was located between my two children, one in Rochester and one in Hopkins, so it was a perfect location. So we bought that business, and I've been running that now for a little over 10 years.
Okay, and what have you always been interested in plants?
I guess I would tell you that I've always been science interested. In college, I was a pre-med student, decided that being a doctor probably wasn't the thing for me, and really just have always had a love of science, observing nature and all that. And the plants provide that kind of a challenge, especially when you do hundreds of different varieties like we do. And so I find it ever challenging and a whole lot of fun.
Well, I'm really excited to learn a lot more today. I know I grew up on the farm, so I should know. I know about corn and beans and vegetable gardens somewhat. My mother had a green thumb. But I don't really know how to take care of plants or which ones are good or whatever, but I'm going to get to that. I got a lot of questions for you today. So for the viewers' sake, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show a video clip of my visit to the Garden Center the other day. So with that, let's just take a look at the screen over here. So I drove up and isn't it beautiful? And look at that. I just went, oh my goodness, look at the beautiful colors.
Yes.
Gorgeous colors. And a nice welcoming entrance. I get inside and just almost overwhelmed by all the beautiful things to look at. Yeah, pottery, I mean, you have something for everybody. That sculpture, I want that sculpture. And then I walked inside and I saw even more. You have something for every gardener. Yep, I'll take one of those.
Yep.
So many pots to choose from. And this is what I was really impressed with, is that the signs. For people like me, you come in, it's like, I don't know, oh, this would grow good in the shade or the sun, or it helps identify. And if you're looking for a gift for someone, or maybe something a little small to put on their table, you've got so many choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, those rocks are cool. It's so refreshing to see those beautiful flowers. It's so, when you walk into a nursery and you smell the fragrance and the colors and all the various different plants and succulents, and it's just so beautiful to see. You walk in there and you just feel like, oh, summer's coming, spring is here, and you know, it's just something really good to look forward to. I love going into the nursery.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, I'm going to paint a little bit of a scenario here, and I'm the perfect candidate because I just don't know that much about all this, and I love plants. I love flowers. I just haven't learned. And so let's just say I moved. What types of things would help you to assist me in choosing something for my new place?
Well, these days, a very handy tool is your cell phone or an iPad. Snap a few pictures of the area that you want to put the plants. Could be indoor plants, could be outdoor plants, could be annual plants, perennial plants, trees, shrubs. Basically, with those pictures, we have a better idea of what space you're working with. We would ask some simple questions about number of hours of sunlight directly on a particular area, and help guide you to the right plant in that regard. Beyond that, it's your eye. It's the color. What fascinates you? What textures do you like? And what heights can you tolerate? And you know, obviously everyone has a budget. That's not something we get into great depth on. That's up to you. But we can work with you and help you in just about any regard you can with just a few simple questions. But as you alluded to earlier, you know a lot about corn, a lot about beans. I know beans about corn or beans. And that's because I haven't had the experience. I haven't learned by my successes and failures. That's one of the things that fascinates me with plants, is that they're all very, very different. And so once we zero in on the ones you'd like to try, we can advise you on what type of care they require, how much watering is required, how much fertilizing is required, and so on and so forth.
You know, I know our viewers probably would ask a lot of them, what's the difference between a perennial and an annual?
Okay. Perennials, most people have the impression that I stick it in the ground and I walk away and it just lives forever. Well, close. But basically the definition is an annual plant conducts its entire life cycle in 1 year. So it grows from a seed, it flowers, and produces more seed, it dies away, dropping the seeds to come up again next year. Where a perennial plant, the actual crown of the plant, which is just beneath the surface of the soil, above the roots, that survives the winter. It goes dormant, and it comes back the second year, and the third year, and the fourth year, if it's cared for properly. Many of the plant varieties we sell at the greenhouse aren't widely available in the prairie. You just don't see them growing out there. They need a little extra care from the gardener to make them healthy. So basically a perennial plant will come back year after year. They have a very brief seasonal blooming period, some early, some mid, some late. Whereas an annual, once it sets flower, it's going to do that the entire season. So for long-lasting color all season long, it's hard to beat annuals. And then planting a perennial garden's a little more dicey because you need to choose plants that'll bloom at different times, so there's always something interesting in the garden.
Yes. One more question. The cornflower plants that are at the nursery, they're just beautiful. Are they hard to maintain?
You're talking about the coneflower?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. They are not. They're very rugged, very, very hardy plants.
Okay.
Those are akin to prairie coneflowers.
Oh, okay.
So there is some natural parentage there. These are all hybrids. Today the hybrids are very free branching and bushy, more compact. Traditional coneflowers are very tall. These, we have them from very tall to very small, and from yellows to oranges to reds to purples to white. It's a beautiful category of plants, easy to care for.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on the season, people are thinking about whether to bring plants inside or outside. Can you give us some thoughts about that, and how soon ahead of time should they be thinking about stuff?
Sure. So plants that would do well indoors are generally tropical plants because they have a great flexibility in their light and water needs, and they can adapt to different conditions. So the plants like we have on the table here are some examples of tropical plants that this time of year, summertime in Minnesota, many people enjoy them outdoors in partly shaded or fully shaded areas. They adapt very well to the indoors because there's not a lot of bright light indoors generally. So when you're planning to bring a plant in, I advise people not to leave them outside when temperatures are going to dip below 50 degrees at night. Tropical plants, where they grow naturally, very rarely will drop that cold. That would be an anomaly. So once the temperatures at night start to get close to 50, then you should start thinking about bringing them in. Bringing them in is a process of, you don't want to bring any beasties in from outside. So there's some treatments that you can do prior to that. So usually preparation would occur sometime in September with regard to maybe some insecticides and things like that, so you're not bringing animals into the house. And then by the time you bring them in, that's all taken care of, and you bring the plant in. You'd care for it over winter. The watering requirements change, the feeding requirements change. It's like going from 80 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour in the house. And so you just have to change your care practices a little, back off on fertilization in the winter, generally speaking. And then long about March, they'll start to behave like they're ready to go outside, but still quite cold. And you want to use that 50-degree night as your measuring stick. When it stays steadily over 50, very safe to go outside with your indoor plants.
Very good.
You mentioned those were tropical plants?
Yes.
So does that change a bit with other types of plants?
Yeah, it certainly does. So made several attempts to winter over a perennial plant indoors, say a tree that's marginally hardy in our zone. They need their nap. They need their dormant period. And when you bring them indoors, unless you have the very special conditions required for them to go dormant and stay dormant, they generally will poop out on you, and they won't winter very well. Tropical plants as a category are plants that are very adaptable. And so things like hibiscus and mandevilla and citrus that you might have around, these are all things that can be brought in and cared for if you understand the difference in care required in lower light conditions than they have outdoors.
Yes.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I have a hibiscus tree that I've had for 25 years.
Yes.
And it's outside now, and the flowers are coming out. And then I bring it in when it starts getting, like you said,
Yep.
Steve, chilly.
Yep.
I love it. And it just sits in the corner in my dining room, and I prune it back, and it's great.
Yeah.
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 25 years.
Yeah, and at the Garden Center we have some plant examples that are many, many years old that are kind of fun to see.
Yes.
Very large things that have been around forever that probably wouldn't fit in most people's homes. But
Got a big cactus there.
you know, as a plant lover, it's very difficult to say, yeah, see you later. You know, even though I know a guy where I can get another one, it's just something challenging about trying to keep them healthy in different conditions.
Do you usually have to change the soil as well if you bring them inside for the winter, or vice versa, taking them back out?
Yeah, sometimes refreshing the soil occasionally, annually or biannually, is a good idea because soil components decompose as well. The soils become less porous, they become a little tighter. It's just nice to refresh them. And so taking part of the soil away and replacing it with fresh is not a bad idea at all. So people do a lot of repotting either in the fall or in the spring before the season. It's a good time to do those kinds of things.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about, let's just say I want to buy a gift for a friend. You know, I give them a gift card, or maybe if I'm brave enough, with a lot of help, I will go to the center and I'll select a very easy to take care of plant. And I think you brought some with you today that are on the table. Can you tell us about each one of these?
Sure. So this one in the front is a ZZ plant, and they call it ZZ plant because its real name is very hard to say. So ZZ plant is very, very rugged. It has a bulb formation under the soil. Very, very, very drought tolerant. Wouldn't even blink if you forgot to water it for a month. So it's the type of plant that just about anyone can deal with. They live so long that they're oftentimes passed from generation to generation. If you grow this plant in a small container, it will stay compact. If you give it room for the root system to expand, it will get quite large. So you can control its size by the container you choose to put it in. But this is a very easy plant to care for people. This plant right here is a Dieffenbachia. It's famous for its very low light capability. It can be in quite a dark room, away from windows, away from any direct light whatsoever. Very good low light plant. Once again, very forgiving in terms of its water. It has a cane structure. It holds a lot of moisture within the plant. As long as it's not neglected for too long, they last and last as well, and can get very big if you give them lots of room for the root system to get big. In the middle, we have a bowl of succulents, and there's a few different varieties in there. The succulent is an interesting plant. It's more akin to tropicals than it is to a cactus, in my opinion. Cactus can go weeks and weeks and weeks without water. Succulents have very thick, fleshy parts to them, and they hold a lot of moisture, but they need a little more care than, say, a cacti. But they're very, very popular right now because there's a lot of great color, texture, very, very easy to grow, fun to combine them different ways. So that's a very, very popular category. The plant on the far side is a tiger fern. It basically is a variegated Boston fern. So it can be grown as a hanging basket. You oftentimes see Boston ferns as a hanging basket. It's a great pot plant. It's a great hanging plant. The variegation in the tiger fern is interesting, especially in a very darker space. If you're in a darker location, that chartreuse coloring makes that plant pop out of the darkness better than, say, just a green fern. So very easy to maintain that plant, bring it indoors. Ferns are an interesting category. They take way less moisture than people think. A lot of people kill them with spritzing and misting, and it's just a lot of work for naught. They don't really need that kind of treatment. They're able to adapt to just soil watering, and they do very, very well.
I could see this plant with a lot of the gray tones that people are putting in their homes now, the darker gray to the lighter, because you've got the variation there.
Yep.
Be a very pretty plant.
Yeah, and when you're selecting plants for indoors particularly, a challenge is color. And you don't have a lot of flowering plants that'll last a long time in the house. There are some, but there's a lot of foliage that gives a great deal of color. These are just a handful of the kinds of things we carry. Lots of great color and foliage that can be used.
Yeah, pretty colors.
That is. I remember growing up in the farm, my mother had ferns growing outdoors a lot, and they seemed to, now they would be considered an annual?
Those are perennial ferns.
Perennials,
If they're growing
because they come-
outdoors and they stay outdoors, and they come back every year,
Okay, perennial.
those would be your perennial ferns. Yeah, and there are many of
Okay.
those too.
Because I don't remember her ever digging them up. Or, But she also had some inside too.
Yep.
So she had the both. I don't remember the coloring. I just remember they're beautiful along the edge of a house, along an edge of something that's just almost like a filler.
Yeah, they're very
really is.
lacy and airy.
Yep.
Ferns are.
Yeah, and they're invasive isn't the right word, but they're very rapidly expanding types of plants. If you have ostrich fern, for example, you'll have several ostrich fern a few seasons from now. They spread prolifically and can fill a space up very nicely.
Are they the real tall ones, Steve?
They're generally tall, yeah.
Okay.
They can get up to 3 feet tall,
Okay.
even taller in the right conditions, but yeah.
And they're a little shorter. They don't have the real long.
Well, an ostrich
Poles,
fern's
do they?
pretty long, lacy fern, pretty traditional fern. If you were
Okay.
walking through the woods, you're
Okay.
going to see a lot of ostrich fern in there. You're going to see a lot of cinnamon fern in there and different types of fern, but
Yeah.
they're larger plants. They grow outdoors. Yep.
Interesting. I didn't realize there were that many different types of ferns.
Oh, there's
That's
tons of them.
interesting to
There's
know.
tons of them, yep. And there's
Yeah.
annual ferns, there's perennial fern. It's kind of interesting. Here, we would call that an annual fern. In Florida, that's a perennial fern. So it kind of depends where you are in the
The
country.
location,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you mentioned that, without getting involved in this topic, but you talked about how the pot size makes a difference on how full the plant gets or how big it gets.
It totally does, yep. Because the root system is really the heart and soul of a plant. And when you grow plants for a living, you learn that what matters is what's going on in the roots. And when you see something on a plant above ground, it gives you an indication that there might be something going on with the roots, maybe not very desirable thing. So for example, this beautiful Dieffenbachia, I noticed that there's a brown tip on one of the leaves. And so the question is, did that occur because it was left too dry on a hot day for too long? Or did it occur because we're watering it too often and causing root damage either from heat or dryness or from overwatering? Both will give the same symptom. And so figuring out the right frequency of water and to water correctly, thoroughly, and completely each time you do water, and then waiting the appropriate period of time, depending on the plant variety, till you water again. So indoors, a good starting point is once a week, water like you mean to drown it. Water it so there's no dry particles in the pot whatsoever, and then put it back on display when it's done dripping, and leave it there for at least a week. And there are varieties that I always say God gave us all a water meter. It's the first knuckle.
Yes.
If you squirrel it into the soil and it's moist, don't water.
Okay.
But if it's dry down an inch or so, you're probably good to go ahead and saturate it again.
Okay.
And then wait until the top dries down just a little bit. But that's a good starting point. And some plants need less and some need a little more. But by observing their behavior, you'll figure it out.
Probably depends a lot on where you have it, more
It totally does. And
inside or outside.
Yep,
and
or even
sun or
indoors. Is
shade.
it got a lot of light or a little bit of light? To me, it's like how heavy is your foot on the gas? If there's
Yeah,
a lot of
that's
light,
true.
the plant is living fast and furious,
Yeah.
needs a lot of water, needs a lot of fertilizer. If
Yes.
it's dim light, it's going to need less water. It's going to need less fertilizer. And so you have to be aware of those situations. And once you learn those general principles, it's pretty easy to observe and figure out what a particular plant likes.
Right. Have you seen the latest app? It's a floral app, and you put it up next to your
Yep,
flowers,
I've
and it
seen it
says
advertised, yep.
too much water, not enough water.
Yep.
It tells you exactly what's wrong with your plant.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a big improvement for people who have no idea.
Right.
But that same symptom could be either one. And that's something an app can't really tell you, but the person watering that plant should be able to say, I'm going to guess I haven't watered it enough, or they're going to say, oh, I water it every 3 days.
Yes.
What I find most common is people commit the act of putting water on a plant, but they haven't watered the plant. So watering the plant means saturating the soil media completely and letting it drain away the excess. The soil will only hold what it can hold.
Right.
That's a thoroughly watered plant. Dribbling a little water on it here and there could leave the lower regions of that pot bone dry. The water will never get down there. So when I water a plant like, say, this ZZ plant, I would, in my mind, say, how much water would it take to fill that pot if there were no plant in it? I'm going to need at least that much water to get that wet, because it'll channel through and run out.
Okay, and with that, we have one segment of our show. It's called Viewers' Questions. So, Bob and Elaine, we only have about 2.5 minutes, either or.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, one of the questions was regarding garden clubs. Put on by towns and cities, sponsored by towns, cities, counties. How much interaction do you find with your business?
Well, we have quite a lot. You know, there's a Lakeville Garden Club, there's a Farmington Garden Club, there's just about every municipality has one. Bigger garden clubs, Hennepin County, Carver County, Scott County, they all have organizations that the public can join. They have events, they have plant sales, they have, we support them as best we can. They're a bunch of people who are acutely interested in gardening. They want to learn. And that's really what we're all about at independent garden centers. That's the difference. You can buy plants a lot of places, but you can't buy the information we'll give you. We won't take your money for that. That's just what we do. It's kind of our mission to help you become so successful with your plants that you have a great amount of joy with it. Nobody likes to fail, and usually that failure is a result of just not having the right information for that variety. And so it's important when you buy a plant at a garden center that you talk to someone, how do I care for this particular plant? What is it like? What is it not like?
Yeah.
Yeah, and garden clubs help with that. They help disperse that information.
Right.
Okay, we have less than a minute, so maybe a quick question.
Okay, so if I have a garden and the grass starts invading from the lawn, is that, what do you do to get rid of that grass? You can't use some type of grass killer because it'll probably hurt your flowers.
Well, there actually is selective herbicides. And one of the selections is, I want to kill just grass, not broadleaf. So there is a product that can do that. It's part of the gardening process. You dig it out. You beat it back. It's not going away forever. It'll come back. And then you get to dig it out again. So it's one of those things that's just part of gardening. If you want to treat it with a chemical and kill it that way, you can go right over the top of your flowers and not hurt them.
Wow, that's good to know.
That is really good to know. And with that, we're running out of time here. So anyway, I have learned so much. Oh my goodness. So first of all, Elaine, thank you. Bob, it's your last time with us. We've really, it's been a journey. It's been what, about 15 years or thereabouts?
Exactly, yeah.
We've so enjoyed having you with us.
It's been great.
Steve, I have learned a lot already. We have a special surprise for our viewers, though. We have actually a second episode. We're going to go out to Steve's nursery and do some hands-on shooting out there. That'll be really fun. So that'll be the following month. But Steve, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for explaining and bringing your plants and explaining what you know. I know you've just touched a little bit on the tip of everything that you've worked with and what you know over the years, but thank you so much again.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes.
And viewers, again, watch for that next episode. Thank you for joining us. Hope you learned some things as well today, and we'll see you next time on Generations.